Welcome to Marple Whispers, where the faintest murmur conceals a deadly truth. I'm Sean, your guide through a labyrinth of deceit and danger. Every step echoes with secrets, and every shadow hides a motive. Are you ready to unravel the mystery, or become part of it? In the heart of sun-soaked Madrid, elderly sleuth Miss Jane Marple arrives for a quiet vacation, only to stumble into a deadly art dealer's villa, where a themed Last Supper dinner turns fatal. The host collapses in agony, poisoned, amid a web of suspects, a jealous son forging masterpieces, a flirtatious fiancé hiding loans, a secretive wife eyeing inheritance, and a doctor with a hidden family scandal. As betrayals unravel like Da Vinci's brushstrokes, Miss Marple's sharp wits expose the killer's twisted motive of protection and revenge. But who slipped the cyanide? Stay tuned. This cozy mystery explodes with Spanish intrigue, dark secrets, and a shocking twist that proves human nature's deadliest art. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Journey. The platform at Atocha Station in Madrid was a whirlwind of motion and sound, a far cry from the sleepy rhythms of St. Mary Mead. Miss Jane Marple, clutching her sturdy handbag with one gloved hand and steadying her hat with the other, descended from the carriage with the careful poise of someone who knew the value of observation over haste. The air was alive with the chatter of porters, the rumble of luggage carts, and the distant whistle of departing trains. Around her, travellers hurried by. Elegant women in fur-trimmed coats, businessmen with briefcases, and families laden with parcels. Each one a story waiting to unfold, or so Miss Marple often thought. She paused for a moment, her keen blue eyes scanning the crowd, noting the way a young man glanced furtively over his shoulder, or how a woman's tight grip on her child's hand betrayed more than maternal care. Human nature, she reflected, was much the same whether in an English village or a Spanish capital. It simply wore different hats. At her advanced age, such adventures were rare indeed. Miss Marple had always preferred the quiet familiarity of her cottage garden, where the most pressing mysteries involved the untimely demise of a prize rosebush, or the curious behaviour of the new vicar's wife. Yet here she was, halfway across Europe, courtesy of her nephew Raymond West. He had presented the trip as a belated birthday surprise, complete with first-class tickets and assurances of comfort. Aunt Jane, he had said over tea at his London flat, his voice brimming with that modern enthusiasm she found both endearing and slightly suspect. Madrid is precisely what you need. The Prado Museum alone, think of it. Velázquez, Goya, all those old masters gazing down with their enigmatic eyes. It's a place for quiet contemplation, away from the village gossip. She had smiled politely, but in her heart, she wondered if the real impetus came from his wife Joan, whose recent passion for continental art had filled their home with reproductions and travel brochures. Joan, with her artistic temperament, was forever seeking inspiration, and Miss Marple suspected this gift was as much a convenient excuse for Raymond to indulge her whims as it was a treat for an elderly aunt. A warm breeze swept through the station's grand hall, carrying with it the irresistible aroma of freshly fried churros from a vendor's cart nearby. Miss Marple's stomach gave a small, approving rumble. She had always appreciated the simple pleasures of travel, even if they came laced with the unfamiliar. Beside her, Dolly Bantry emerged from the train, her cheeks flushed with excitement and her arms full of guidebooks and a rather impractical parasol. Dolly, the wife of Colonel Arthur Bantry and Miss Marple's steadfast friend from back home, had insisted on joining the expedition. Arthur wouldn't know a holiday if it marched up and saluted him, she had confided with a wink during their journey. He's content with his golf and his Times crossword. But me, I crave a bit of spice, Jane, a dash of foreign intrigue. Madrid. Imagine the flamenco, the tapas, the romance in the air. Miss Marple had chuckled softly, knowing Dolly's idea of romance was more likely to involve a good mystery novel than any actual dalliance. But her friend's enthusiasm was infectious, a welcome counterpoint to the long hours on the train. Together, they navigated the throng toward the exit, where a taxi awaited to whisk them to their accommodations. The Hotel El Retiro, nestled on a quiet street bordering the lush expanse of the park that shared its name, had been chosen for its unpretentious charm and practical amenities. Recommended by Raymond's travel agent, it boasted English-speaking staff, a boon for two ladies whose Spanish extended little beyond gracias and por favor, and easy access to the city's treasures. As they settled into their adjoining rooms, the afternoon sun filtering through lace curtains, Miss Marple unpacked her few essentials: a woolen shawl for cooler evenings, her ever-present knitting bag, and a small notebook for jotting down those stray thoughts that so often proved useful. It was during this unpacking that a knock sounded at the door. A hotel page delivered an envelope addressed in a firm, familiar hand. Miss Marple opened it with mild curiosity, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose. The note was from Sir Henry Clithering, the retired Commissioner of Scotland Yard, whom she had encountered on more than one occasion back in England. By some serendipitous twist, or perhaps not so serendipitous, given Sir Henry's penchant for turning up where trouble brewed, he was in Madrid delivering a series of lectures on criminology at the local university. "My dear Miss Marple," the note read, "what a delight to hear of your arrival. I am invited tomorrow evening to a most unusual dinner at the residence of Signor Eduardo Vargas, a prominent art dealer here in the city. He styles it as a Last Supper. 13 guests themed after Da Vinci's masterpiece, with all the drama that implies. Do join me, and bring your charming companion if she wishes. I suspect it will provide ample material for your incomparable insights. Yours, Henry Clithering." Dolly, peering over her shoulder, let out a gasp of delight. A themed dinner! How thrilling! And with an art dealer. Think of the glamour, the secrets lurking behind those canvases. Miss Marple folded the note thoughtfully, her eyes twinkling with that quiet spark that her friends knew well. Peculiar gatherings, in her experience, seldom remained merely peculiar. They had a way of revealing the cracks in polite society, the hidden motives that simmered just beneath the surface. As she resumed her knitting, the soft click of needles filling the room, she couldn't help but feel a faint thrill of anticipation. Madrid, it seemed, held more than museums and churros. It promised the kind of puzzle that made even an unexpected journey worthwhile. Chapter 2. The Art Dealer's Domain. The taxi wound its way through the winding streets on the outskirts of Madrid, leaving behind the clamour of the city centre for the serene hush of affluent suburbs. Miss Jane Marple gazed out the window, her sharp eyes taking in the elegant villas that dotted the landscape, each one a testament to wealth accumulated through generations or perhaps more dubious means. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden hue over the Manzanares River, which sparkled like a ribbon of liquid amber below. "Quite the setting for a drama," she murmured to Dolly Bantry, who sat beside her fanning herself with a lace handkerchief, despite the mild evening air. Sir Henry Clithering, occupying the front seat, turned with a chuckle You have a knack for sensing intrigue, Miss Marple. But tonight, it's merely a dinner, though Vargas does have a flair for the theatrical. The villa of Signor Eduardo Vargas loomed ahead, a sprawling edifice of white stucco and terracotta tiles, perched on a gentle rise, with manicured gardens cascading down to the riverbank. Iron gates swung open at their approach, revealing a driveway lined with cypress trees that whispered secrets in the breeze. As the car pulled up to the grand entrance, flanked by marble columns entwined with ivy, Miss Marple noted the subtle signs of opulence. A fountain bubbling in the courtyard, its waters reflecting the fading light, and windows aglow with the promise of warmth inside. Yet there was something almost too perfect about it all, like a stage set meticulously arranged for an audience. In her experience, such perfection often concealed flaws, cracks in the facade where human frailties seeped through. Senor Vargas himself emerged to greet them. A robust figure in his early 60s, his portly frame clad in a tailored suit that strained ever so slightly at the buttons. His beard was trimmed to precision, framing a face that beamed with hospitality, though his dark eyes held a calculating glint, much like those of the village auctioneer back in St. Mary Mead, who always knew the true value of a hidden gem. "Bienvenidos! Welcome, my dear friends," he boomed, his voice rich and resonant, carrying the cadence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. He clasped Sir Henry's hand firmly, then turned to the ladies with a bow that was both courtly and theatrical. "Sir Henry has spoken so highly of you, Signora Marple. Forgive me, Miss Marple, and Signora Bantry. It is an honour to have such distinguished guests grace my humble abode." "Humble?" Miss Marple suppressed a smile as they stepped into the foyer, where the air was scented with polished wood and fresh flowers. The house was a treasure trove, walls adorned with masterpieces that could rival the Prado. A brooding El Greco here, a vibrant Murillo there, each framed in gold that caught the light from crystal chandeliers overhead. Antique furniture, carved oak sideboards and velvet-upholstered chairs, spoke of old Spanish nobility, but Miss Marple's keen gaze detected newer acquisitions, perhaps bought with the profits of shrewd dealings in the art world. Vargas led them through to the drawing-room, a spacious chamber overlooking the gardens, where a fire crackled merrily in a massive stone hearth, warding off the encroaching chill of dusk. The other guests were already assembled, sipping aperitifs from delicate glasses, sherry for some, vermouth for others, arranged around a low table laden with olives and almonds. Sir Henry performed the introductions with his usual urbane efficiency, but Miss Marple paid close attention, filing away the nuances of each encounter like threads in a tapestry she might later unravel. First, there was Isabella Vargas, the hostess, a woman of striking elegance in her mid-50s, with sharp, aquiline features softened only by the cascade of pearls around her neck. She extended a manicured hand, her smile polite but distant, as if appraising the newcomers for their social worth. "Encantada," she murmured, her voice cool and measured. Miss Marple noted the faint lines of tension around her eyes, reminiscent of Mrs. Price Ridley in the village, who always wore her grievances like invisible jewellery. Isabella's gown, a deep crimson silk, rustled as she moved, and there was a subtle clink of bracelets that suggested a life of luxury, yet perhaps one not entirely content. Beside her stood Carlos Vargas, the son, a brooding young man in his 30s. His dark hair tousled in the manner of an artist who cared little for convention. He nodded curtly, his eyes shadowed and intense, clutching a sketch pad under one arm as if it were a shield. "Pleased to meet you," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Miss Marple observed the way his fingers drummed restlessly against the pad, much like young Tommy Pierce back home, whose fidgeting always betrayed a simmering resentment toward authority, particularly paternal. Clinging to Carlos's arm was his fiancée, Maria Lopez, a vivacious dancer from Seville, her dark curls bouncing with every animated gesture. She was the picture of youthful energy, her laughter like tinkling bells as she greeted them effusively. "Oh, how wonderful to have English visitors! Tell me, do you tango? Madrid has the most divine clubs." Her eyes sparkled with mischief, but Miss Marple caught a fleeting glance toward Carlos, one that held a hint of possessiveness, or perhaps anxiety. It reminded her of the village girls who flirted to mask deeper insecurities. Then there was Dr. Pablo Ruiz, the family physician, a slight man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a persistent nervous tic that caused his left eyelid to flutter intermittently. He bowed awkwardly, murmuring pleasantries in accented English, his hands clasped tightly as if to still their tremble. "A pleasure, senoras. I trust your journey was smooth." Miss Marple smiled kindly, noting how his gaze darted toward the door, like that of Dr. Haydock during a particularly puzzling case, when he suspected more than he let on. Elena Torres, Vargas's secretary, was a study in quiet efficiency. A young woman in her late 20s, with neatly pinned hair and a modest grey dress that blended into the background. She offered a firm handshake, her demeanour composed, yet her eyes, intelligent and watchful, missed nothing. "Welcome," she said softly. And Miss Marple sensed a depth there, akin to the underestimated spinsters of St. Mary Mead who held the keys to many a secret. Finally, the American collector, Mr. Harlan Thorpe, dominated the room with his booming presence. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a loud checked suit, he pumped their hands vigorously, his voice carrying across the space like a foghorn. "Well, howdy. Harlan Thorpe at your service. From Texas, don't you know? Oil money, but art's my real passion. Vargas here has a Da Vinci sketch that's got me hooked. Priceless, I tell ya." His laughter was hearty, but Miss Marple detected a shrewd undercurrent, much like the American tourists who visited the village and haggled over antiques with feigned nonchalance. As they settled into plush armchairs, servants circulated with trays of canapés, tiny bites of anchovy on toast, cheese drizzled with honey. Vargas took centre stage, glass in hand. "My friends," he announced, his beard quivering with enthusiasm, "tonight is no ordinary dinner. We shall recreate Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, not upon a wall in Milan, but here, in flesh and fine cuisine. 13 souls at table, mirroring the masterpiece, with all its symbolism of fellowship, and perhaps a touch of betrayal." His eyes twinkled wickedly, and a ripple of amusement passed through the group. Miss Marple, sipping her sherry delicately, counted silently. Herself, Dolly, Sir Henry, Isabella, Carlos, Maria, Dr. Ruiz, Elena, Thorpe. That made 9, plus Vargas. "But Senor Vargas," she interjected mildly, her voice cutting through the chatter like a gentle breeze, "that accounts for only 10. Or am I mistaken? The household. Surely there are more?" Vargas threw back his head and laughed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed off the walls. "Ah, the observant English lady. Indeed, we have my faithful butler, and the maid who will join us briefly in service. But the 13th, myself, of course, presiding as the host, much like the central figure in Da Vinci's work. He winked conspiratorially, and who knows? In art, as in life, one must always watch for the Judas among us. The remark hung in the air, light-hearted, yet laced with an undercurrent that set Miss Marple's mind whirring. Conversation resumed. Thorpe boasted of his latest acquisitions, a Rembrandt etching and a dubious Botticelli. Carlos sketched idly on his pad, his fiancée Maria leaning over to whisper something that made him scowl. Isabella exchanged polite banalities with Dolly about Madrid's fashions. Dr. Ruiz fidgeted with his watch chain, his tic more pronounced. Elena moved quietly, refilling glasses with a precision that spoke of long practice. Miss Marple listened, her knitting needles emerging from her bag to click rhythmically, a habit that often lulled others into underestimating her. She noted how Thorpe's eyes lingered on Maria, eliciting a sharp glance from Carlos. How Isabella's fingers tightened on her glass when Vargas mentioned the Da Vinci sketch. How Elena's gaze flicked toward Dr. Ruiz with what might have been concern. Subtle threads, these, hints of jealousy, greed, hidden alliances that wove through the room like invisible smoke. As the butler announced dinner, the group rose, moving toward the dining hall. Miss Marple trailed behind, her thoughts already piecing together the puzzle. In St. Mary Mead, such gatherings often revealed more than intended. Here, in this villa of art and artifice, she suspected the evening would unfold with the inevitability of a well-plotted tragedy. The air hummed with anticipation, and she felt that familiar tingle, the sense that beneath the veneer of civility, something darker lurked, waiting to be exposed. Chapter 3. The Table Set. The double doors to the dining room swung open with a flourish, revealing a chamber that seemed transported from the annals of Renaissance Italy, yet infused with the sultry warmth of Spanish evenings. A long oak table dominated the space, its polished surface gleaming under the soft glow of candelabras that dotted its length like sentinels. 13 high-backed chairs were arranged with deliberate symmetry, echoing the composition of Da Vinci's famed mural. Vargas positioned at the center, where Christ would sit in the original, his guests fanning out on either side in a tableau of calculated harmony. The walls were hung with meticulous replicas of masterpieces, a somber Judas lurking in shadow, a serene apostle gesturing in debate, their painted eyes seeming to follow the sheep living as they entered. Heavy velvet drapes framed tall windows overlooking the darkened gardens, where the river's murmur provided a distant underscore to the scene. The air was rich with anticipation, laced with the faint aroma of impending delicacies, garlic, saffron, and the promise of wine. Senor Vargas ushered them in with the air of a maestro conducting an orchestra, his gestures broad and inviting. "Behold, my friends, the stage is set. Take your places and let the feast commence." He directed each guest with practiced ease, ensuring the arrangement mirrored the painting's iconic layout. Miss Marple found herself seated to the right of Sir Henry Clithering, with Dr. Pablo Ruiz on her other side, a position that afforded her an excellent vantage point for observation. Dolly Bantry was placed across the table, between the vivacious Maria and the brooding Carlos, her eyes wide with delight at the theatricality. Harlan Thorpe, the boisterous American, boomed his approval as he claimed a seat near the end, opposite Elena Torres, whose quiet poise contrasted sharply with his exuberance. Isabella Vargas glided to her place beside her husband, her pearls catching the candlelight like tiny moons. As they settled, a silent maid, dark-haired and unobtrusive, her uniform crisp as fresh linen, glided in with the first course, an array of tapas presented on silver platters. Plump olives marinated in herbs, thin slices of jamon iberico that melted on the tongue, and chilled gazpacho in delicate bowls, its vibrant red evoking the passion of flamenco. Glasses were filled with Rioja, the wine's deep crimson swirling like blood in crystal stems. Conversation bubbled up tentatively at first, then gained momentum, weaving through the room like threads in a loom. Thorpe, ever the showman, launched into a tale of his latest triumph. "You should have seen it, folks. The auction in New York last month. A genuine Titian, hidden away in some dusty attic. I outbid a sheik and a Russian oligarch. Cost me a fortune. But art like that, it's immortal." His laughter rolled across the table, but Miss Marple noted how his eyes flicked toward Vargas, as if gauging the host's reaction to this boast. Vargas nodded indulgently, raising his glass. "Indeed, Mr. Thorpe, immortality at a price. But tell me, have you considered the Da Vinci sketch I mentioned? A preliminary study for the Mona Lisa herself. Priceless, if authenticated." Carlos, idly sketching on a linen napkin with a charcoal stub he produced from his pocket, snorted softly. "Authenticated? Father, you always say that as if every doodle from the Renaissance is a masterpiece waiting for your stamp." His voice carried an edge, like a blade half-sheathed, and Maria laid a hand on his arm, her fingers lingering in a gesture that was both soothing and possessive. "Carlos, mi amor, not tonight. Let's enjoy the evening." She turned to Thorpe with a dazzling smile, her dark eyes sparkling. "Mr. Thorpe, you must tell me about Texas. Is it true the skies are endless, and the men ride horses like in the films?" Her flirtation was light, almost playful, but Miss Marple caught the glare Carlos shot across the table, a flash of jealousy that reminded her of young Leonard Clements in St. Mary Mead, whose possessiveness had once led to a regrettable incident involving a garden rake. Dr. Ruiz, beside Miss Marple, cleared his throat nervously, his eyelid twitching as he spooned gazpacho. "Senor Vargas, your health. How is the heart condition? The medication I prescribed?" Vargas waved him off with a chuckle. "Pablo, always the worrier. I'm fit as a matador. No pills tonight. Let the wine be my tonic." Ruiz subsided, but Miss Marple observed his fingers drumming on the tablecloth, a rhythm of unease that spoke volumes. She turned to him gently. "Doctor, you must see many fascinating cases in a city like Madrid. Do tell me, is there much call for your services among the artistic set?" He hesitated, then replied in his accented English, "Ah, yes, Miss Marple. Artists, they live intensely, you know. Passions run high, and sometimes, well, the body pays the price." His words trailed off, and she filed away the implication, much like the vague hints from the village doctor that often preceded a scandal. Across the way, Isabella leaned toward Dolly, her voice a murmur of refined complaint. "My husband and his extravagances, these dinners, the collections, one wonders where it all leads." Dolly, ever sociable, nodded sympathetically. "Oh, I know, dear. My Arthur is the same with his golf clubs. Always one more must have." But Isabella's smile didn't reach her eyes, and Miss Marple wondered at the undercurrent, reminiscent of Mrs. Weatherby's subtle barbs about her spendthrift spouse, which had masked deeper resentments. Elena Torres excused herself midway through the appetizers, rising with a polite murmur. "Pardon me, a document in the study. Senor Vargas asked for it earlier." She slipped out, her steps soundless on the tiled floor. returning moments later with a slim folder that she placed beside her employer's plate. Vargas glanced at it dismissively, tucking it aside. "Business can wait, Elena. Tonight is for pleasure." Yet Miss Marple noted the brief tension in Elena's posture, the way her hands clasped tightly before resuming her meal. A sign, perhaps, of unspoken pressures, like those borne by the overlooked secretaries in her village who knew more than they let on. The main course arrived with ceremony. A vast paella, its golden rice studded with succulent prawns, mussels, and chorizo, steaming in a wide pan carried by 2 servants. The aroma filled the room, eliciting appreciative sighs. Plates were heaped generously, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Maria's upcoming dance recital, Thorpe's plans for a new gallery wing. But beneath the bonhomie, Miss Marple's attuned senses detected fissures. Carlos's napkin sketch, now revealed as a caricature of Thorpe with exaggerated features, hastily crumpled when Maria noticed. Isabella's furtive glance at the folder, as if it held secrets she coveted. Dr. Ruiz's persistent tic, worsening with each sip of wine. Dessert followed, a creamy flan caramelized to perfection, accompanied by fresh figs and almonds. As coffee was poured, its bitter steam rising like incense, Vargas stood, glass aloft. "To art, eternal and unforgiving. May it inspire us, challenge us, and reveal our true selves." The toast was echoed around the table, glasses clinking in a chorus of crystal. Yet Miss Marple, raising her own cup, observed the shadows playing on faces illuminated by candlelight. The forced smiles, the averted eyes. It was all too familiar, these tensions simmering like a pot about to boil over, much like the gatherings in St. Mary Mead, where polite facades cracked under the weight of hidden motives. She sipped her coffee thoughtfully, her knitting bag at her feet, ready for whatever revelations the night might bring. The stage was indeed set, and in her experience, such setups seldom ended without a dramatic turn. Sir Henry leaned toward her, whispering, "Quite the assembly, eh? Vargas has outdone himself." She nodded, her eyes never ceasing their quiet vigil. "Yes, Sir Henry, but one wondered, who plays the role of betrayer in this little drama?" The words hung unspoken between them, as the candles flickered on, casting elongated shadows that danced like omens on the walls. Chapter 4. The Fatal Toast. The candles had burned lower, their flames dancing fitfully in the draughts that whispered through the dining room, casting elongated shadows that twisted like conspirators across the faces of the assembled guests. The remnants of the flan lay scattered on plates, caramel residues glistening stickily, while the air hung heavy with the mingled scents of coffee and lingering saffron. Señor Eduardo Vargas, still enthroned at the table's center, leaned back in his chair with the satisfied air of a man who had orchestrated a flawless performance. His beard, now slightly disheveled from the evening's merriment, framed a smile that bespoke triumph. "My friends," he declared, his voice booming with renewed vigor as he lifted his coffee cup, "we have feasted like apostles, debated like philosophers. But let us seal this night with one final gesture." Miss Jane Marple, her own cup cradled delicately in her hands, watched as the others followed suit. The coffee was strong, its bitterness tempered by a swirl of cream that some had added, others declined. Sir Henry Clithering, ever the gentleman, raised his with a nod of appreciation. Dolly Bantry, her cheeks flushed from the wine, giggled softly at some quip from Maria. Across the table, Harlan Thorpe slurped his noisily, his boisterous energy undimmed, while Carlos stared moodily into his, the charcoal smudges on his fingers leaving faint marks on the porcelain. Isabella sipped hers with elegant restraint. her eyes fixed on her husband with an expression that Miss Marple found curiously inscrutable. Part affection, part something sharper, like the glint of a hidden blade. Dr. Pablo Ruiz, his tick now a rapid flutter, hesitated before drinking, as if weighing an invisible risk. Elena Torres, composed as ever, took a measured swallow, her gaze drifting momentarily to the folder still tucked beside Vargas's plate. Vargas stood once more, commanding the room's attention. To betrayal and redemption, the eternal dance of art and life. His words carried a dramatic flair, echoing off the replica-painted walls, where the apostles seemed to lean in, eavesdropping on the mortal mimicry below. Glasses and cups clinked in response, the sound a brittle harmony. Miss Marple touched her lips to the brew, noting its acrid undertone, but her mind was elsewhere, piecing together the evening's mosaic, the fleeting glances, the unspoken barbs, the subtle shifts in posture that betrayed alliances and animosities alike. It struck without warning, swift as a serpent's strike. Vargas's hand flew to his throat, his cup clattering to the table and spilling dark rivulets across the cloth. His face, moments ago ruddy with mirth, contorted into a mask of agony, eyes bulging, lips parting in a strangled gasp. "Poison! It's poison!" he rasped, the word tearing from his chest like a confession. Then, with a convulsive shudder, he pitched forward, his bulk slamming onto the table amid a cascade of overturned goblets and shattering plates. Wine pooled like blood, mingling with the spilled coffee. As chaos erupted in a symphony of screams and shouts. Isabella's cry pierced the air first, high and keening, her hands clutching at her pearls as if they might anchor her to sanity. "Eduardo! No, Dios mio!" She half rose, then sank back, her composure fracturing like fine china. Maria burst into tears, burying her face in Carlos's shoulder, while he stared in stunned silence, his sketch pad forgotten on the floor. Thorpe leapt to his feet, bellowing, "What the devil? Someone help him!" Dr. Ruiz, galvanized into action, pushed past Elena and knelt beside the fallen host, his fingers probing for a pulse at the neck. "He's gone," he announced after a tense moment, his voice trembling, the tick now a frantic spasm. No heartbeat. It was instantaneous. Sir Henry Clithering, drawing on years of Scotland Yard discipline, took command with quiet authority. "No one touch anything. Stay where you are." He moved swiftly to the telephone in the adjoining hall, dialing for the authorities in his halting Spanish, augmented by urgent gestures. Miss Marple remained seated, her posture unchanged, save for the steady click of her knitting needles emerging from her bag, a rhythmic counterpoint to the pandemonium. From this vantage, she surveyed the scene like a chessboard, noting the positions. Thorpe's chair knocked askew in his haste, a smear of coffee on Carlos's sleeve. Isabella's, handkerchief dabbing at dry eyes, Elena's hands folded tightly in her lap, Ruiz's pallor as he wiped sweat from his brow. Human reactions, she mused, were the truest clues, panic revealing what poise concealed. The police arrived with commendable speed, their sirens wailing faintly in the distance before tires crunched on the gravel drive. Inspector Javier Lopez, a stern figure in a rumpled suit, his moustache bristling with authority, burst into the room flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a forensic technician. His dark eyes swept the tableau, assessing with the precision of a hawk. "Nadie se mueva! Nobody move!" he barked, switching seamlessly to English upon spotting the foreigners. He sealed the doors with a gesture, instructing his men to cordon off the area, while the technician began photographing the disarray. The sprawled body, the stained tablecloth, the scattered utensils. Lopez wasted no time, his questions sharp and probing, delivered in a clipped tone that brooked no evasion. He began with Thorpe, who mopped his brow with a silk handkerchief. "You argued with Senor Vargas earlier, see? About the Da Vinci sketch." Thorpe blustered, his Texas drawl thickening under pressure. "Argued? Hell, it was a negotiation. He claimed it was authentic, but I had my doubts, demanded proof. But murder? I ain't no killer. I'm a collector." Lopez's eyes narrowed, jotting notes in a worn pad. Turning to Carlos, the inspector pressed, "Your relationship with your father, it was strained." Carlos, his face ashen, nodded reluctantly. "He never valued my work, called it amateur scribbles. We fought often, but poison? I'd sooner challenge him openly." Maria, still weeping, clung to him, murmuring denials that Lopez dismissed with a wave. Elena Torres faced the scrutiny next, her voice steady despite the pallor creeping into her cheeks. "I prepared the coffee, as Senor Vargas instructed. Fresh grounds, boiled water, nothing more." Lopez probed further. "And the folder you fetched, what was in it?" She hesitated. "Business papers, valuations for the sketch." He glanced at them, then set them aside. Isabella, now eerily composed, straightened her gown as Lopez approached. "Senora Vargas, any recent changes in your husband's affairs?" She met his gaze levelly. "The will was updated last month, favouring me, yes, but that's hardly motive. We were devoted." Her tone carried a chill, and Miss Marple noted the subtle emphasis on devoted, akin to the village widows who protested too much. Dr. Ruiz fidgeted under interrogation, his tic betraying nerves. "I prescribed medication for his heart, digitalis to regulate the beat. He took it regularly, but tonight he skipped it." Lopez leaned in. "And cyanide, familiar with it, doctor?" Ruiz blanched. "In medicine, rarely, but I had no reason." Sir Henry provided his account succinctly, vouching for the English guests while Dolly stammered through hers, wide-eyed. Miss Marple, questioned last, offered mild responses. "I observed nothing untoward, Inspector," her harmless demeanour ensuring she was dismissed as peripheral. Yet, as Lopez coordinated the removal of the body and the collection of samples, the coffee dregs, the cups, the spilled liquids, she absorbed it all. The faint blue tinge to Vargas's lips, suggestive of cyanide, the proximity of the art studio, where such chemicals might lurk for gilding, the untouched folder, now impounded. As the guests were herded to the drawing-room under guard, the villa's opulence felt oppressive, the masterpieces on the walls mocking the tragedy. Miss Marple settled into an armchair, needles clicking, her mind a whirl of connections. The toast to betrayal, how fitting, she thought. In St. Mary Mead, such evenings often unmasked the viper in the nest. Here, amid foreign grandeur, the same truths held. Who had slipped the fatal dose? The resentful son, the ambitious wife, the loyal secretary with hidden depths, or the doctor, whose remedies could kill as easily as cure? The night stretched ahead, pregnant with revelations, and Miss Marple felt that quiet thrill, the hunt for truth in the labyrinth of lies. Lopez paced, muttering to his aides, but she knew the real unravelling would come not from bluster, but from the subtle threads she alone seemed to grasp. Chapter 5. Shadows in the villa. The dawn broke over Madrid with a deceptive serenity. The sun's rays filtering through the villa's shutters like tentative fingers probing a wound. The grand residence, once a bastion of opulent hospitality, now felt like a gilded cage under Inspector Lopez's decree. No one was to leave until the investigation advanced. Guards patrolled the perimeter discreetly, their footsteps crunching on gravel paths, while inside the air hummed with unspoken accusations and stifled grief. Miss Jane Marple, having slept fitfully in a guest room adorned with faded tapestries, rose early, her mind as alert as ever. She donned her sensible tweed skirt and cardigan, slipping her knitting into her bag before joining Dolly Bantry for a stroll in the gardens. The grounds were a labyrinth of rose bushes and fountains, their waters murmuring secrets to the breeze. But today they offered no solace, only shadows that clung like remnants of the night's horror. As they wandered along a hedged path, Miss Marple's ears caught the low timbre of voices from the nearby conservatory, a glass-enclosed haven filled with exotic ferns and orchids that now served as a backdrop for discord. She paused, signalling Dolly to hush, and they drew closer, concealed by a trellis of climbing vines. It was Carlos and Maria, their argument slicing through the morning calm like a poorly hidden dagger. "You think I don't know about that loan from Thorpe?" Carlos hissed, his voice laced with bitterness. "Sneaking around behind my back. Do you take me for a fool?" Maria's response was sharp, defensive. "It was for us, Carlos. For your studio, your dreams, Thorpe offered. And your father, he would have ruined everything." Her tone softened to a plea. "Please, Ama, it's not what you think." But Carlos's retort was a slammed door, his footsteps retreating, leaving Maria's soft sobs to mingle with the drip of condensation on the glass. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Dolly, who whispered, "Heavens, Jane! Sounds like jealousy brewing into something nastier." Miss Marple nodded, her blue eyes thoughtful. "Quite so, Dolly. It reminds me of that affair with the baker's son in St. Mary Mead. Loans and love tangled up, leading to all sorts of mischief. But here, with art and fortunes at stake, the knots may be tighter." They continued their walk, Miss Marple piecing fragments like a jigsaw. Carlos's resentment toward his father, now possibly redirected. Maria's flirtations at dinner, perhaps a ploy for financial aid. And Thorpe's role as the opportunistic lender, his Texas bravado masking sharper intents. Returning to the villa, they found the drawing room transformed into a makeshift command center, with Inspector Lopez's men cataloguing items from the dining area. Sir Henry Clithering, looking every inch the retired commissioner in his crisp shirt and tie, beckoned them over for tea served on a side table. Strong English brew, a small comfort amid the foreign turmoil. As Dolly busied herself with the cups, Sir Henry leaned in confidentially toward Miss Marple. "The lab results came swiftly, cyanide without a doubt. Quick acting, dissolved in the coffee pot, I'd wager. Tasteless, odorless in small doses, but lethal in moments. The question is access. Who tampered with it between brewing and serving?" Miss Marple sipped her tea delicately, her gaze drifting to the garden view, where a peacock strutted, its feathers iridescent, yet somehow ominous. "Access, yes, but motive weaves the web, Sir Henry. Cyanide isn't commonplace. One thinks of photography chemicals or, in an art dealer's home, perhaps gilding solutions from the studio. And the timing, right after that toast to betrayal. Symbolic, wouldn't you say?" Sir Henry stroked his chin. "Indeed. Lopez is leaning on Thorpe now. The man's in the study, sweating through another round of questions." Through the half-open door, they could hear the inspector's clipped tones and Thorpe's blustering defense. "I wired the money yesterday, sure, for the sketch, but kill him. I'd sooner shoot my own foot." Miss Marple's ears perked at the admission. A large sum transferred, tying Thorpe deeper into the intrigue, much like the hasty investments that had undone the village banker years ago. As Sir Henry excused himself to consult with Lopez, Elena Torres approached the tea table, her steps hesitant, her grey dress rumpled from a sleepless night. She clutched a handkerchief, twisting it like a lifeline. "Miss Marple, Signora Bantry, may I join you? I need to speak with someone outside this madness." Dolly patted the seat beside her, invitingly, while Miss Marple regarded the young woman with gentle encouragement, her knitting needles pausing mid-stitch. "Of course, my dear. You look troubled. Sit and unburden yourself. Secrets have a way of festering if kept too long." Elena sank into the chair, her intelligent eyes shadowed with worry. Senor Vargas, he was authenticating that Da Vinci sketch for Mr. Thorpe. But there were discrepancies, you see. The provenance papers, they didn't add up. I handled the documentation, and lately he'd been pressuring me to adjust certain details. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Forgeries, perhaps. Not the sketch itself, but the certificates to inflate its value. He said it was harmless, just business, but I feared exposure. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice soothing yet probing. "And did anyone else know of this? Your doctor friend, perhaps? Dr. Ruiz seemed quite attentive last night." Elena flushed slightly. "Pablo? He's an old acquaintance, kind but worried about my position here. Vargas could be ruthless. He held sway over many lives." The revelation hung in the air, a thread Miss Marple mentally knotted to others. Elena's access to the study, her fetching of the folder during dinner, the potential for blackmail or desperation. It echoed the plight of the postmistress in St. Mary Mead, coerced into small deceptions that snowballed into disaster. Dolly gasped softly. "Forgeries in art! How thrillingly scandalous! But dangerous, too." Elena nodded, glancing nervously toward the hall where Lopez's voice rose in interrogation. If the sketch was exposed as overvalued, Thorpe would lose a fortune. And Carlos, he tried his hand at replicas, you know, to prove his talent to his father. But Vargas mocked them. As Elena excused herself, promising discretion, Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the click-clack a metronome for her racing thoughts. The villa's shadows deepened with each disclosure. Isabella's poised grief, perhaps veiling relief at an inheritance unchallenged by scandals. Ruiz's medical knowledge, ideal for dosing poison undetected. Thorpe's financial stake, a motive as old as greed itself. She wandered to the window, observing Carlos pacing the terrace alone, his fists clenched, while Maria watched from afar, her expression a mix of love and fear. Inspector Lopez emerged from the study, his mustache twitching with frustration, Thorpe trailing behind, looking defiant, yet shaken. "We'll test the studio chemicals next," Lopez announced to Sir Henry. "Cyanide traces there could point fingers." Miss Marple, overlooked as usual, absorbed the plan. The art studio, a realm of creation and potential destruction, where pigments and poisons blurred lines. She recalled a similar case involving a painter's palette tainted with malice, and wondered who among this cast had dipped their brush into deadly hues. The morning wore on, tension coiling like a spring. Dolly chattered about returning home, but Miss Marple hushed her gently. "Patience, Dolly. The shadows here are lifting, one by one. Human nature abhors a vacuum. Soon the truth will rush in." Outside, the peacock screamed, a harsh prophetic cry that sent shivers down spines. In this villa of illusions, where art mimicked life and betrayal lurked in every brushstroke, Miss Marple sensed the climax approaching, her unassuming presence the key to unlocking the enigma. The game was afoot, and she, the quiet observer, held the winning hand. Chapter 6. Unravelling Threads. As twilight descended upon the Vargas villa, The sky outside painted itself in hues of bruised purple and fading gold, casting elongated shadows that crept across the marble floors like fingers grasping for hidden truths. The day's interrogations had left the household in a state of suspended animation. Guests confined to common areas, servants tiptoeing with trays of untouched sandwiches, and Inspector Lopez's men methodically dusting surfaces for prints. Miss Jane Marple, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere, felt a quiet resolve stirring within her. The pieces were scattering like autumn leaves, but she knew from long experience that patience and persistence would gather them into a coherent pattern. She sought out Dr. Pablo Ruiz in the library, a dimly lit sanctuary lined with leather-bound volumes and the faint musty scent of aged paper, where the doctor sat hunched over a medical journal, his spectacles reflecting the glow of a solitary lamp. "Dr. Ruiz," she said softly, closing the door behind her with a gentle click. "Might I have a word? You seem quite burdened, if you don't mind my saying so." He looked up startled, his left eyelid fluttering in that telltale tick, and gestured to the armchair opposite. "Miss Marple, of course, though I'm not sure what more I can offer. The inspector has grilled me thoroughly." She settled gracefully, her knitting bag at her side, and regarded him with those mild blue eyes that invited confidences without demanding them. "It's not facts I seek, Doctor, but understanding. Human frailties, you see, they're universal. Like that poor soul in my village who prescribed tonics with the best intentions, only to find them twisted into something sinister." Ruiz sighed, removing his glasses to polish them unnecessarily. "Very well. Senor Vargas's heart condition, it was worsening. I prescribed a new regimen, digitalis derivatives, to steady the rhythm. He was compliant, usually taking them with his evening coffee. But last night he waved them off, said the wine sufficed." Miss Marple nodded encouragingly. "And the coffee service? You were near it when Elena poured." His tick intensified, a rapid blink that betrayed inner turmoil. I merely observed. No tampering, I swear. Why would I? Vargas was my patient, my friend." Yet his hands trembled slightly as he replaced his glasses, and Miss Marple noted the evasion, much like the village pharmacist who fidgeted when questioned about missing vials. She pressed gently. "Friends can become burdens, Doctor, especially if they hold secrets over one another. Elena Torres, she seems fond of you." Ruiz coloured faintly. "Elena, a professional acquaintance, nothing more. She's capable, but Vargas, he demanded much from her." He rose abruptly, murmuring excuses about needing air, leaving Miss Marple to ponder the unsaid. Loyalties strained, perhaps to breaking point. Venturing from the library, she wandered the hushed corridors, her sensible shoes whispering against the rugs. The villa's grandeur felt hollow now, its artwork staring down with judgmental eyes, as if privy to the drama unfolding below. In a shadowed alcove near the dining room, something caught her gaze. A crumpled napkin discarded beneath a side table, overlooked in the chaos. She bent to retrieve it, smoothing it out with care. It was Carlos's handiwork from dinner. A charcoal sketch, hasty yet evocative, depicting Harlan Thorpe as Judas Iscariot. Exaggerated features twisted in treachery, a bag of silver coins spilling at his feet. The symbolism was stark, a young artist's vent for simmering rage. Miss Marple tucked it into her bag, recalling the jealous outbursts of St. Mary Mead's aspiring poets, whose verses often masked deeper vendettas. Carlos's disdain for Thorpe, tied to that loan Maria had mentioned, now took on sharper contours, a motive sketched in black and white. Emboldened, she slipped into the dining room, now cordoned but unguarded in the evening lull. The table remained as it was post-tragedy. Cloth stained with wine and coffee, chairs askew, candelabras cold. Under the pretext of retrieving a forgotten shawl, she examined the scene afresh, her keen sight tracing details the police might have dismissed. Near Isabella's seat, a faint discoloration marred the fabric, not the splash of spilled liquids, but a subtle ring, as if from a damp vial or pill bottle, hurriedly concealed. It evoked memories of Mrs. Edge's tea party mishap, where a similar mark had betrayed a sleight of hand with laudanum. Isabella's composure during the toast, her quick recovery from hysteria, could it veil a calculated act? Inheritance loomed large, especially with a revised will favouring her amid whispers of marital discord. As she straightened, Sir Henry Clithering entered, his face etched with the weariness of a man bridging officialdom and friendship. "Miss Marple, snooping, are we?" he teased lightly, though his eyes held respect. "Lopez has shared some findings. Thought you'd appreciate them." They sat at the table's edge, and he lowered his voice. "The cyanide traces to the art studio, used in electroplating for gold leaf restorations. Potent stuff, kept in locked cabinets, but accessible to those with keys. Vargas, Carlos for his work, and Elena, who inventories supplies." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. "Elena admitted as much?" Sir Henry nodded. "Under pressure, yes. She handled the chemicals weekly, diluting them, for safety. But she swears no theft, though Lopez is sceptical, given her proximity to the coffee." The disclosure ignited sparks in Miss Marple's mind, connections firing like synapses. The studio as the poison source, fitting for a household steeped in artifice, where creation and destruction danced in tandem. Elena's forgeries, confessed earlier, now intertwined with this. Perhaps Vargas's demands had pushed her to extremes, protecting her reputation or something dearer. And Ruiz's prescription, digitalis, known to amplify cyanide's lethality in certain interactions, a fact any doctor would know. His tic at the mention of coffee, his ties to Elena, could they form a protective alliance? Thorpe's caricature as Judas hinted at betrayal in deals gone sour, the wired funds a desperate bid to secure a fraudulent sketch. Carlos's resentment, Maria's secretive loan, jealousy fueling a fatal impulse. Isabella's stain, a hint of opportunity seized. She shared fragments with Sir Henry. Drawing parallels to village scandals, the envious heir who tampered with inheritance papers, the spurned lover who turned to subtle sabotage. It's all threads, Sir Henry, greed, love, fear, woven into a noose. But which hand pulled it tight? He marvelled at her insight. "You're a wonder, Miss Marple. Lopez plans a gathering tonight to confront them all. Perhaps your threads will snag the culprit." As they parted, the villa's clock chimed to the hour, a sombre toll that echoed through the halls. Miss Marple returned to her room, knitting by the window as stars pricked the sky. The unravelling was nigh. Human nature, predictable in its flaws, would soon lay bare the deceiver. In this foreign labyrinth of passion and deceit, she felt at home, the quiet spinster poised to expose the heart of darkness. The evening deepened, suspense coiling tighter, each shadow a promise of revelation. Chapter 7. The revelation. The drawing-room of the Vargas villa pulsed with an electric tension as night enveloped Madrid, the chandeliers overhead casting a harsh glare that accentuated the weary lines on every face. Inspector Javier Lopez had summoned the group with the authority of a conductor, calling his orchestra to order, his moustache quivering as he paced before the assembled suspects. The air was thick with the residue of unspoken fears. Cigarette smoke curling from Thorpe's ashtray. The faint rustle of Isabella's silk gown, the distant hum of the river below serving as a sombre underscore. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle facing the hearth, where embers glowed like watchful eyes. And Lopez stood at the centre, his notebook clutched like a talisman against chaos. "My friends, or should I say suspects," Lopez began, his voice a gravelly baritone that commanded silence. "We gather not for pleasantries, but for truth. Senor Eduardo Vargas was murdered under this roof, poisoned with cyanide in a ritual meant to celebrate art, but which unveiled betrayal instead. The evidence points inward. The toxin from the studio, the coffee tampered with precision. One of you is guilty." His gaze swept the room, lingering on each in turn. Thorpe's defiant scowl, Carlos's brooding stare, Maria's tear-streaked cheeks, Isabella's icy poise, Dr. Ruiz's twitching eyelid, Elena's folded hands. Sir Henry Clithering sat unobtrusively to the side, Dolly Bantry wide-eyed beside him, while Miss Jane Marple occupied a corner armchair, her knitting needles moving in a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm that belied the sharpness of her observations. Accusations erupted like fireworks in the charged atmosphere. Thorpe, unable to contain his bluster, pointed a meaty finger at Carlos. "It's the boy, resentful artist, always sketching his hatreds. He had access to the studio poisons and that napkin of his calling me Judas. He wanted his old man out of the way for the inheritance." Carlos shot to his feet, eyes blazing. "You hypocrite! You argued with father over that fake sketch, wired money to buy silence. You're the outsider here, sniffing for bargains like a vulture." Maria clutched his arm, whispering please, but Isabella interjected coolly, "Enough, Maria, your flirtations with Thorpe, disgraceful. Perhaps you sought to secure your future, eliminating the obstacle." Maria gasped, "How dare you? I loved Eduardo like a father." Dr. Ruiz shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, "This is madness. Let's not descend into baseless slander." Elena remained silent, her eyes downcast, but Lopez silenced the fray with a sharp clap. "Sit. We deal in facts, not fury." Miss Marple cleared her throat delicately, a sound so mild it cut through the din like a whisper in a storm. All eyes turned to her, the harmless old English lady, overlooked amid the drama. "If I may, Inspector," she ventured, her voice soft yet carrying an undercurrent of unyielding logic. Lopez, intrigued by Sir Henry's prior nods to her acumen, gestured assent. "Proceed, Signora Marple. Your insights have been noted." She set aside her knitting, folding her hands in her lap, and began, her tone conversational, as if recounting a village tea party gone awry. "You see, this tragedy reminds me so much of events in St. Mary Mead. Surface civility masking turbulent undercurrents. A Last Supper indeed, with its themes of fellowship fractured by deceit. Let us unravel it step by step, shall we?" She turned first to the artifact at the heart of the intrigue, the Da Vinci sketch. "Mr. Thorpe, you came to acquire a treasure, but suspicions of forgery loomed. The provenance papers handled by Elena showed discrepancies, adjustments made under pressure from Senor Vargas, who inflated values for profit. But the sketch itself, a clever replica, crafted by Carlos in a bid to prove his talent only to be mocked by his father. Carlos, your resentment festered, much like young Mr. Symington's in my village, who forged signatures to spite his domineering parent. Yet resentment alone doesn't poison coffee." Carlos paled, but Miss Marple's gaze moved on, compassionate yet relentless. "To Isabella, The devoted wife, beneficiary of a recent will change. Your composure speaks volumes. One thinks of Mrs. Fortescue, who endured extravagances with calculated patience. That faint stain near your seat, perhaps from a vial, concealed during the meal's distractions. Opportunity, yes, but motive? Vargas's affairs might have strained your union, yet I sense no lethal intent there. Isabella's lips tightened, but she offered no denial. The room hanging on Miss Marple's words like a jury awaiting verdict. Maria, your vivacity masked desperation. A loan from Thorpe to fund Carlos's dreams, flirtations to secure it. Jealousy could ignite rash acts, as it did with the housemaid in St. Mary Mead who tampered with letters out of spite. But your tears seemed genuine grief, not guilt. Maria sobbed quietly, Carlos's hand finding hers in a rare show of tenderness. Miss Marple's eyes settled on Elena, softening. Dear Elena, the efficient secretary, privy to secrets. Vargas demanded forgeries from you, threatening exposure. Your quiet strength hides depths, like the overlooked clerks in my village who bore burdens silently. But why cyanide? Access to the studio, yes, but the act feels protective, not vengeful. Elena's knuckles whitened, her gaze flicking to Dr. Ruiz, who had grown ashen, his tic of frantic betrayal. And now, Dr. Ruiz, Miss Marple continued, her voice gaining a gentle firmness, your medical expertise is key. You prescribed digitalis for Vargas's heart, a drug that, when combined with cyanide, accelerates death dramatically, turning a survivable dose fatal. You knew his habit of pills with coffee, yet he skipped them that night. Coincidence? No. You slipped the cyanide into the pot during the dessert distractions, aware the interaction would seal his fate swiftly. Motive? Not personal gain, but protection. Gasps rippled through the room. Lopez leaned forward, rapt. You see, she elaborated, drawing the net tighter. Eleanor is no mere acquaintance. She is your daughter, concealed to shield her from scandal. Born of a youthful indiscretion, placed in service here unwittingly. Vargas discovered this, seduced her with promises, then threatened blackmail unless she forged those documents. You learned of it, perhaps from Elena's confidences, and acted to safeguard her honor, her future. The Last Supper provided the stage. Betrayal avenged, much like the village doctor who once covered for his kin with a merciful overdose, though that ended in confession too. Ruiz crumpled, burying his face in his hands as sobs racked his frame. It's true, all of it. Eduardo, he was a monster beneath the charm. Elena came to me in tears. I couldn't let him destroy her. The cyanide from the studio, I diluted it, but with the digitalis, God forgive me. Lopez signaled his men, cuffs clicking as Ruiz was led away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Isabella watched impassively, perhaps relieved at the unmasking that preserved her legacy. Thorpe mopped his brow. Carlos embraced Maria. Elena wept openly, relief mingled with sorrow. As the group dispersed under Lopez's orders, Sir Henry approached Miss Marple, awe in his voice. Brilliant as always. How did you pierce it, the daughter connection? She smiled faintly, retrieving her knitting. Human nature, Sir Henry. The protective glances, the shared anxieties, echoes of St. Mary Mead's hidden families. People are patterns, repeating across borders. Dolly beamed. Jane, you're a marvel. But Miss Marple demurred, her eyes twinkling. Merely observation, my dear. Now, perhaps a quiet cup of tea before we depart this stage of sorrows. The villa sighed into silence. The river's flow, a reminder that life, like art, endured beyond betrayal. In Madrid's embrace, Miss Marple had once more illuminated the darkness. her unassuming wisdom the true masterpiece.